I think it's time that the criminal justice system gets a complete facelift, and I'm here to do it. I am attorney Lauren Noriega, hashtag your favorite show lawyer. I'm a true, real lawyer.
I'm talking Noriega, Noriega, Noriega.
95% of my clients come from Instagram.
Consult with your girl first. I got you. I'm gonna make sure you don't sound like a fucking idiot.
I'm a hip-hop junkie, the gangster in the courtroom, and I just hammer it.
My world would be like shit without Lauren. Like, I'd be in prison right now.
I've been called aggressive.
We started arguing, I'm saying something. She's like, man, shut up. A real bitch is talking. I'm like...
A revolutionary banging on my adversary.
My clients range big time. I mean, anywhere from driving on a suspended license all the way to murder.
Today's a beautiful day to defend some bullshit.
Yeah, so we got a very special guest today. Could you do me a favor and introduce yourself?
Yeah, my name is attorney Lauren Noriega. I am a California state and federal criminal defense attorney.
Great, thank you for coming on today. And so, you know, I saw, I discovered you on YouTube. That's how I found out about you. And I was really interested in your style and the way you know, address like fighting, like taking cases and the type of cases you fight. What was it that inspired you to go into criminal justice?
Well, I knew I wanted to be a lawyer at a very young age. I just always kind of had the lawyer brain. I tell everybody when I was a toddler, anytime my mom would tell me no, I would like ask her what was her reason for saying no. That way I could argue with her to get a yes. And so as a very young child, my mom used to always tell me, if you want to argue, you can grow up and be an attorney. And so I knew from a very young age that that's what I wanted to do. But I think in terms of criminal law, I always had an interest in it, but what really solidified it for me was when in law school, I was in the Project for the Innocent clinic, where we worked on cases of wrongful convictions, and that's what really, I mean, it was just, they do such amazing work over there. So that's what really, you know, kind of solidified it for me that I knew I wanted to do criminal defense.
And when you were a child, knowing that you wanted to go into that field, was that that attitude or that style nurtured by like other adults, teachers, counselors, or like the kind of argumentative style, or was it something they were like, hey, we know you want to be a lawyer, but tone it down a bit?
You know, I mean, I always got in trouble for having a smart mouth. You know, I never was like a bad kid, like doing bad things. You know, of course, I had my little like rambunctious teenage years, but for the most part, when I got in trouble as a kid, it was because of my mouth. So, you know, I did get a little bit of, hey, tone it down when I was a kid. But my family has always been very supportive in, you know, my dreams and ambitions toward being an attorney. I come from a family of law enforcement, so it's always just kind of been in the family, kind of criminal law. But yeah, for the most part, my family has been amazingly supportive, and they know who I am. And so I think no matter what I did as a career choice, they probably expected me to just be who I am and kind of feisty and sassy. So
when you started, when you're in law school and you start on that program,
Project for the Innocent.
Project for the Innocents, what did you see that kind of was that really got you thinking like, man, this is the route I need to take. This is where I need to be headed at?
I think just really being able to get a bird's eye view on how wrongful convictions happen. I think that's something that up until recently wasn't really talked about. And, you know, in most of the cases, you can kind of see how the stars aligned for that wrongful conviction to occur. And a lot of times it has a lot to do with the trial attorney just dropping the ball. And so for me, I've always just been I have a lot of empathy for people. And so I just really, you know, I put myself in these people's shoes. You know, I can't imagine what it would feel like to be in prison, you know, have a life sentence, knowing you did not commit the crime. You know, it's got to feel like screaming at the top of your lungs and nobody can hear you. And so that just really, really, for some reason, got to me. And so I was like, you know, if even if I can prevent one wrongful conviction, then my purpose on this earth has been fulfilled.
And how many wrongful convictions did you see overturned while studying under them?
Well, they've overturned a handful of convictions, but actually the one that I was just randomly assigned, we actually got that one overturned.
Oh,
So
wow.
so actually my case got overturned, and that was just such a fulfilling, you know, moment in time for me that I just, you know, I was like, you know, it's just so meaningful. So it was really incredible.
And so after you take the bar, actually, let me ask about that, because I know that's like one of the most difficult tests you can take.
Yes.
The bar test. Everybody always says, like, man, like there's people who fail like 4 or 5 times when taking it. After you passed it, how did that feel? Like, just knowing like that's one of the most difficult tests you could take, and you conquered that. How was that feeling?
I mean, it was unreal. So a lot of people who aren't lawyers or in law school don't realize that you take the test like in July and you don't get your results until like November.
Oh, wow.
So you're kind of like, there's like a several month period where, you know, it's all you're thinking about, and you're like, you know, you're even like shit, did I put the wrong answer on that? You know what I mean? So
Yeah.
I mean, it was unreal. It felt like just the hugest weight had been lifted off my shoulders. But I also at the same time knew, like, all right, this is the beginning of a whole nother list of challenges. You know, I knew that, you know, I'm licensed now, I can go practice law, but that also meant that, you know, there were new challenges ahead. So it was bittersweet. It was definitely a victory. But at the same time, I knew that it just meant that I was climbing to a level of additional, potentially more difficult challenges that I would need to work toward.
Great. And you're a hip hop head, right? So you like a lot, yeah. And how did you manage to like mingle that with your style of you know, practicing law? Because I seen, you know, a lot of your cases, like you go in there like real like gangster about it. You know what I mean? Like you're ready to go. Like how did you do that in a way? Because I know like courtrooms are very uptight, you know, very boring. Like how did you manage to do that?
Well, you know, I don't necessarily go into the courtroom with that approach. I think one of the most important things about being successful, not even just in law, but any career, is knowing your audience. You know, can you read the room? Who, you know, what type of person is your judge? What type of person is your DA? And then being able to act accordingly to get what you want. So I've just always been, you know, in love with hip hop. So it's not really, you know, what I think a lot of people don't understand is it's not necessarily like a conscious decision to mingle the two or to use that, you know, in my profession. It's kind of just, I'm just being who I am.
Yeah. So it's like you go in there, you handle business, but the mentality is always there. Like you're gonna act accordingly while in the courtroom,
Right.
but you're always gonna have that mentality of like, I know what I have to do.
Right. Absolutely.
Dope.
Yeah.
And so now that we brought up the hip hop question, let me ask, who were your influences growing up? Like, who were your favorite artists in hip hop that you were just like, oh man, I really like the way that guy spits or that girl spits, or like they're really killing it?
I've always been a huge fan of Brother Lynch Hung.
All right.
Like I really like the underground stuff. UGK, I bumped a lot of UGK growing up. Obviously the West Coast legends, you know, Snoop, Dr. Dre. I like old school rap. You know, I'm not really into the newbies. Some of the new stuff is great, but you know, for the most part, I liked kind of the old school legends that a lot of people grew up on.
And when you're getting ready for a case, right? Let's say you have a big a trial going on, and you're about to do either your opening or closing remarks. Before you get to that point, do you ever like put your headphones on before it's time and like just jam out, get ready to go, or how do you prepare for that?
It's more on the drive there. So, you know, I'll put some Project Pat on. Huge
Yeah.
Project Pat fan. You know, it's really more on the drive there, because once I'm in the courtroom and I'm like in the zone, I'm more focused on the case, the facts of the case, my arguments. You know, there's not really necessarily time to sit and like pump myself up with a song, because I'm too much focused on the actual case. But definitely on the drive to the courthouse, yeah, it's on for sure.
Yeah, and I know with law, there's a lot of reading that goes on. Sometimes seems tedious.
Yeah.
What do you do, like, to keep yourself awake, pumped up, and observant? Like, because there's times where I'm reading where I just drift off. Like, oh, okay,
Right.
yeah, like, but I know, like, if you skip something that's essential, you could really skip over, like, you're dealing with somebody's life there.
Right.
How do you stay focused on that?
Well, I mean, a lot of coffee, you know, to start. But you know, I'm also very lucky in that I'm so interested and passionate about what I do that I'm usually very interested in what I'm reading. And you know, you also have to kind of learn how to, you know, get your work done when your brain is amenable to it. You know, am I on a roll right now or in the zone? I'll roll with that even if I have to stay at the office till 9:30. So if I'm in the zone, like, I make sure that I roll with that, because it's, you know, I don't want to lose that, and then, you know, maybe when I come back the next day I'm not as focused. So it's kind of about time management, you know, making sure that you're sleeping and eating properly, and then a lot of coffee.
It's kind of like a workout.
Kind of.
Yeah, where it's like, sometimes if you're not in the mood and you're trying to work out, you can injure yourself.
Right.
But there are other times where if you're working out and you're in a row, you're like, fuck it, let's go, let's get some more. Yeah, let's get some more.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Dope. And that's another thing I saw on your Instagram page that I was like, oh, you know, she's real dope, because I seen that you also like boxing.
Yeah.
How did you get into that?
I've been boxing for like 12 years now. So I always had an interest. I always like wanted to learn how to box. Like, I was like 18, 19, 20, started getting interested in it. And then, you know, this incident happened where, you know, I was somewhere, everybody had been drinking, and I actually got into a fight with a boy, like a grown boy. And you know, I'm all of like 5 foot, 120 pounds at the time. And so he punched me, almost knocked me out, but I had like a fat shiner. And so that kind of like, I was like, all right, I need to learn how to fight.
Yeah.
And so that's kind of what like pushed me to start it. But then once I started and learned and like got good at it, I became addicted to it, and I just, you know, stayed with it. So.
And do you do any sparring?
You know, I did in the past. I haven't lately, because you know, I do it mostly just to stay in shape and just because I love it. You know, it's not really for competition purposes.
Yeah. You know, because the only reason I ask is because you know, I used to do a lot of boxing, and even just until the quarantine, that's when I kind of had to stop. But I would just jump in the ring to spar, not to hurt anyone, like just like let out some aggression. I mean, at the same time, and I'd be like, oh, it feels good. And I know like there might be times where you're facing like excitement, disappointment, all kinds of stuff in your career. You know what I mean? And maybe that'd be a good way to like just sock somebody up.
It's an outlet. It absolutely is an outlet for sure. Yeah, definitely.
And so I want to ask something, because you know you deal with the criminal law. My dad always told me from a young age, you know, may he rest in peace. He always told me from a young age, if the cops pull you over and they question you, don't tell them anything, right? He goes, their job is to get something out of you. When they say it can and it will be used against you in a court of law, take that seriously. He would always tell me that, right? Like, he goes, you're not going to outsmart them. They know way more than you know. It's their job to get that confession from you. How important is it for people to know that if they're getting arrested? Let's say they didn't commit the crime, but they're getting arrested, and they think, well, I'm going to talk to them. I'm going to try to get my way out of this. Like, how important is it to just wait for your lawyer?
So important, because what ends up happening is you know, whether the person knows their rights or not, what ends up happening is, you know, they'll make statements that get twisted, or they'll end up saying something that now it's more difficult for the lawyer to overcome it. You know, it's extra work for the lawyer in the long run. Whereas if you just shut your mouth, then I'm not having to work to try to suppress any statements that you've made. So there's never ever any situation at all where you have to say anything. Like, I don't care how authoritative they're being, there's never any situation where you are required to say anything to the police. So that's your right. I don't know why anybody would ever give up that right.
Yeah.
It doesn't make any sense to give up that right. So
And
it's critical.
And one of my friends even pointed out that when most police officers get arrested, they exercise that right real quick. You know what I mean? So
Lawyers,
it's like,
and you better believe lawyers do too.
yeah. So if it's good enough for them,
Yeah,
it should be good enough for everybody else.
absolutely.
And so I know you said you take a lot of different cases ranging from, you say, DUI to murder. How difficult is it to switch on and off? Like, let's say, how many cases will you take at a time? And let's say if you're on a DUI case, how hard is it to transition from that, like, say, a few hours later into a murder case?
You know, at any given time, I have about 60 to 70 cases.
Ooh.
But it's not hard because it's the same mentality. You're still in this, you know, frame of mind where you are making sure that nobody's being taken advantage of. You're in this frame of mind where, you know, the prosecution has the burden. So really all you're really having to bounce between is just the facts of the case and maybe different strategy depending on what happened in the case. So it really doesn't require much transition or you know, re-evaluating or anything like that. You know, being a criminal defense attorney, it's a constant state of mind that can be applied to all the cases.
Dope. And you brought up the prosecution as the burden of proof. So it's up to them to prove that you did it.
Right.
So it's not up to you to give up that information.
Right.
Do you ever watch any TV shows like First 48 or any of those? And if so, what's your reaction when those people like that are being arrested, when they start spilling the beans and like unnecessarily like saying all kinds of shit?
You know, you want to like reach through the screen and like just put your hand over their mouth, like, shut up, you're making this worse for yourself. You know, I was just telling my mom yesterday, although I absolutely love watching crime TV and, you know, 2020 and 48 Hours and First 48 and Dateline, I've really had to make a conscious effort to try to watch non-law related stuff that allows me to just zone out, because I work, you know, 70, 75 hour weeks. I eat, breathe, sleep, live law. And so, you know, I'm actually right now consciously trying to take some time away from it.
Yeah.
But I absolutely love crime TV, of course.
And I'm glad that you brought that up, those long hours, right? And the reason I'm glad you brought that up is because a lot of people don't understand that, like, if you want to be successful, if you really have that desire, you have to work for it. A lot of the times, like, you might be working all those hours, but you feel you aren't getting, like, a lot of people will say, hey, you're not getting paid enough, like, based on the amount of hours working, right? But I always try to tell people, like, you might not at that time, but all of that is relevant to what you're working towards to the future.
Right.
Like, how important do you think it is to put in those hours, to work that hard, and oftentimes, like, not feel like you're being compensated at that particular time, but knowing that that's an investment.
Yeah, I mean, you can't stress that enough. And I actually made a post the other day that what I think a lot of young people today don't realize is that not every opportunity is going to have a paycheck attached to it. So you need to learn to recognize opportunities that have value other than monetary. Because if I only took opportunities up until this point that had a paycheck attached to it, I would not be here right now. I would not. So sometimes the value in an opportunity is the experience, or you know, the mentorship that you're going to get from it, or the connections you're going to make. And if you aren't able to recognize that, you're not gonna ultimately end up where you want to be, because the world doesn't owe you anything. If you're working towards something, that doesn't mean that, people should be bowing down to you. You're working toward something. You're working toward being somewhere where you're not now.
Mm-hmm.
And so there's no way around putting in the extra work and proving yourself. There's just no way around that. You can't cut corners there.
Dope. And you bring up mentorship. How important is that in your development? Let's say you're a young lawyer, you're barely learning the ropes, or just anything in general, really. Like you're young, you're on your way up. How important is it to have somebody there to mentor you?
I think it's so important. I have a couple attorney friends who have been attorneys for decades. Both of them are female, and they're just so badass. They're so kick-ass. And we have a mutual respect for each other. They know my style, I know theirs. And there have been tons of times where I go to them and I say, hey, what would you do? This is what I'm dealing with. How would you handle it? And we have an open conversation. And because that's allowing me to draw from their experiences, which, I get a lot of recognition and praise for where I am right now, being so young. But no matter how much praise I'm getting, the fact of the matter is I don't have the experience that these other women do.
Mm-hmm.
And so the only way that I can kind of draw from that is being able to go to somebody and talk about things, based on their experiences. And so I think that's really critical in anything that you're doing.
Dope. And so are you always planning on being a criminal defense attorney, or is like maybe becoming a judge or anything else in your future? Where do you see yourself taking this?
At one point, probably when I was still in school, did talk about maybe one day pursuing being a judge. But I think right now, I love being an attorney so much that I don't know that I would want to be a judge. I think what I'm mostly focused on is continuing to grow and expand, not just as an attorney, but as a business, as my law firm. And I would love to branch out into other states. I would love to have a presence in Houston. I would love to have a presence in Vegas. And so I think right now, my goals for my future and my business future is to expand as a lawyer into other states.
Dope. And because you're doing that, like on the business side of it, I'm glad you brought that up, because a lot of people need to understand on the business side of it, there's a lot to learn, right? Running a business is a little different than, practicing law, and there's trial and errors that are going to happen there. And how much have you learned on the business side of it that was there anything that you weren't prepared for? Anything that you're like, okay, I get it now. Like, I got to change this up. Like, how much did you learn going?
Yeah, I mean, and I'm still learning. This is the first business that I've ever owned. I've never ran a business. I've never owned a business. And so I'm still learning as I go. I think getting up and running was probably a little bit simpler than I anticipated.
Yeah.
But the aspect of what's my overhead cost, how much am I putting back into the business, what is a smart investment for the business, how in what ways what's the smartest way to expand and branch out. So those are all things that I'm really learning as I go.
Yeah, because if you're going to go into different territories or different states, you're going to have to find out what their costs are there. How much, is it going to be worth the investment?
Right.
And, is it the right time for it?
Right. You've got to figure out return on investment. Is it something where I'm going to be the lawyer out there handling that stuff? Probably not, because I have such a heavy caseload in California. So I think one of the other things that I maybe didn't realize is how hard it is to find good help. How hard it is to find employees and people who are passionate and competent and kind of like-minded. That was something that I really didn't know about until I got into this.
And you know, you mentioned good help. I have a few friends that are paralegals. They always talk about how difficult like their job. They basically have to do a lot. How significant is the role of a paralegal for?
Oh, I mean, big, huge, huge. And you have to trust that person so much, you know, because they're really a lot of times the face of your company. You know, they're coming in contact with everybody. And so, yeah, critical, absolutely critical.
Dope, dope. And do you have any advice you'd give to anyone, let's say they found themselves in a situation where they're on the wrong side of the law and like they just get arrested? What would you tell them?
Well, of course, don't make any statements. I would also say be cooperative, because if you're going to resist and fight, you know, they're going to tack on more charges. You're putting your safety in jeopardy. So I would say be cooperative and be silent. Those are the two biggest things that, you know, are simple enough that everybody should remember. And I think those are the most important.
You know, I'm glad you say that, because that's something that I often thought about, but I've actually never even expressed is, yeah, if the cops want to take you to jail, they're going to take you to jail. I mean, if you didn't do anything, fuck it. You're fighting them isn't going to stop them from taking you. They're going to take you. So one way or the other, you're going. You know what I mean? So it is, you know, I'm glad you bring that up, because it is better just to say, fuck it, I'm going to go to jail. Now it's time to fight this from the other side. You know what I mean? Now I got to fight this another way. So yeah, stay calm, everybody. Don't act a fool, because they will fuck you up. And hopefully, you know what I mean, God forbid they escalate it to other ways. You know what I mean? But
yeah, which we see in the news a lot lately. You know,
all the time. Yeah.
You're opening yourself up to a lot of danger when you resist and fight that arrest. You are.
Yeah. And even though it's like, and I'm not saying that the police have the right to do that to you.
Right.
I'm just saying, like, fuck it. They're you know, their fucking adrenaline's pumping high. Just chill the fuck out, because they're not gonna chill out. You know what I mean? So just, yeah. Well, is there anything else you wanted to say before we wrap it up?
No, unless you have other questions. No.
You know, yeah, since you're open to it, let's go ahead and ask a few more questions. Get to know you a little bit more. So everybody, actually, let's kick it off with this. If anyone wanted to reach you, let's say if they need an attorney, how can they get a hold of you?
Best and really only way to contact me is you got to call the office. I have an offsite reception agency who answers my calls 24/7. You know, you could call at 2 a.m. and they'll take the call. So that office number is 213-703-0004. So when you call, you'll conduct intake. So you'll give just the basics of the case info. You know, my receptionist will gather all the info that we need. And then, you know, once I get a chance to look over it, if it's something that we can assist on, then I'll return the call with some quotes and to discuss further.
Dope. And you've had a few high profile clients. When you get them off, is there like, does that kind of forge a relationship or build a relationship with them where they're like, yeah, that's my girl right there, like she's getting me off the hook, or is it kind of all business?
Yeah, you know, I've formed some friendships with some of my high-end clients, but for the most part, in most of those cases, we were kind of friends before they even needed my help. But of course, it makes that bond stronger when you get them the outcome they're looking for sure.
And I know part of the adrenaline rush and motivation would have to be that somebody's life is on the line. How often do you think about that?
I think about it every day. I think about it when the minute I wake up in the morning. I think about it a lot. It's heavy. Yeah.
Have there ever been any cases where you're like, I can't take this? Like, no, like this is not a case that I don't mean like you've taken the case already. I mean like it's being presented to you and you're just like, this, I can't take this case. It's wrong. Yeah. It's not something for me. And how do you come to that determination?
Well, here's the thing. I have a reputation, you know, in LA and probably even outside of LA. And I wouldn't want to take a case that anybody would look at me and say, oh, she has a price, she can be bought. You know, when somebody that our city loves or loved is the victim. I don't want to be attached to defending the person responsible because I don't want, it's really about my reputation.
Yeah.
And then aside from that, I don't think that I would be able to zealously defend anybody who ever was charged with like animal cruelty. So there are just, and it ultimately comes down to the defendant's rights. They have a right to have zealous, aggressive defense. And if I know that because of my principles that I can't provide that, then that's not fair to them. So I wouldn't even take it.
That makes a lot of sense. Yeah, because even though like you said, everybody has the right to counsel, right? Everybody has the right to a trial. As a lawyer, you want to make sure it's the perfect fit for you because you want to be able to fight hard for them. You know what I mean? So yeah, so that makes a lot of sense. And I think that could be for anyone in any situation, any job that they have, career that they take. You have to make sure it fits for you.
Right.
Dope. And how long could some of these trials go? Like, because I remember when I was fighting, because like just to give you a little bit background on me, I'm a youth offender. I was a youth offender. At the age of 16, I got sent to the California Youth Authority. And, they got me for a robbery, just waiting a witness, and they slapped me on with a gang enhancement. And that was the majority of my case, was that gang enhancement. I remember waiting there. It felt like fucking hours. Like, God damn, how long are they going to talk about this shit? How long does that really go on? Because I know as a 16-year-old kid, it probably wasn't as long as I thought it was, but it seemed like hours that they would just yap on and yap on.
You mean how long will the case go on for?
Or even, the case, I know my case wasn't even long. Like, I fought it, but when it actually came to the trial, it was a few days. I'm talking about like the time in the courtroom per day.
I mean, it could range from 15 minutes to all day. I mean, there's not really like an average. Every case is different. And then especially right now with COVID, jury, a lot of courthouses aren't even doing jury trials right now because nobody's showing up when they get their juror summons. So, right now especially, there's really no telling. But in general, before COVID, it's a huge range. Like there's no real average or anything like that. It's very case dependent.
So what would they do in that case if there's nobody available for jury duty, and you just say fuck it, I want a speedy trial? Then, like, how would they go about that?
I mean, they would have to, either the judge will find good cause to continue, and in that case, then you can't. They're not going to dismiss it. They find good cause, or it gets dismissed and it'll probably get refiled later down the line.
Yeah. So just because it's dismissed doesn't mean you beat it.
Right. There are certain cases, depending on what type of case it is, they have a certain amount of times that they can refile it.
Have you ever seen that where somebody has their case dismissed and then they call you back up like, hey, they're after me again?
Yeah, that's happened for sure.
Yeah. Do you ever deal with juvenile matters or how different is that than an adult cases?
So what's really interesting is juvies don't get a preliminary hearing. So that's really interesting. And then for the most part, juvie cases are supposed to be more focused on rehabilitation and treatment instead of punitive measures, which isn't always the case, but it should be. Yeah. But again, all of those are really case specific too. It depends. Has this kid been in trouble a lot before? What types of cases? What's his or her home situation like? Every case is just so different. Yeah,
it's crazy because when I was fighting my case, like I said, I was 16 years old. I'd been busted twice before for two of the robberies. This is my third robbery. They got me for dissuading a witness and a gang enhancement.
Wow.
I had never been to a camp though. Never been to a juvenile camp or anything like that. But the judge, I tripped out when I didn't have a jury. I was like, oh shit, we don't get a jury of our peers as juveniles. That was wild to me. I was like, oh fuck, yeah. I thought I was gonna be able to convince some jurors. Hell nah. Yeah, they sentenced me to 10 years, committed me 10 years to the youth authority. I didn't end up doing that though. You know, but I only did 4. But yeah, it was crazy, you know, because you go in thinking it's gonna be one way, because I had never
Right.
fought a trial as a juvenile. I usually plea out, like
Right.
guilty, send me home, and yeah, you find out like, oh shit, like when they want to hit you, they're gonna hit you. Do
Yeah, absolutely.
you ever see those excessive charges still to this day for juveniles, where they'll just send them like dramatic amount of years?
You know what I find more is not necessarily the length of the sentence, but in my experience, they try to slap more strikes on the juvies, which is awful because, you know, then later down the line they're in a position where they're about to strike out and they're facing, you know, double digit numbers. So that's really like when I take juvie cases, that's my main focus is, look, if you've got to do a couple more years with you know, YA, do that instead of taking the strike. I do everything in my power to avoid strikes in juvie cases.
Yeah.
You're just setting them up for failure.
Yeah, it's so true. Yeah, because you have especially now that they can try, you know. Let me ask you this, because this happened while I was busted. Prop 21 in the year 2000, right? They changed the law where in California where you can be tried as an adult. It used to be 16 years old. They dropped it down to 14, and they gave the power before you had to fight a fitness, right? The judge would see, you know what I mean, have the hearing, see if you're now after that they said the prosecutor had the ability to make that decision.
Right.
How much of a dramatic change do you think that was to the system? And is that still the case now, or has that changed?
No, so with all the new youth offender laws, it's now in the court's discretion.
Okay.
And they have to have a fitness hearing. So
Okay,
it's up to the court. The DA can't make that determination.
Okay.
And I think that's so important. That was definitely the right move.
Yeah.
You know, so there's been a lot of really great youth offender laws that have come down that are retroactive, and they're giving people earlier parole eligibility dates, and you know, opportunities for resentencing, because, you know, these new laws and this new case law, Miller v. Alabama, you know, you can't sentence a youth defendant to a sentence where they're going to likely do the remainder of their natural life behind bars. It's unconstitutional.
Mm-hmm.
So a lot of these folks that were convicted at a really young age, they now have the opportunity to fight for earlier parole or resentencing.
Yeah, I think that's very important, because when I was fighting my case, right, I was going to YA, so I was lucky because I was being tried as a juvenile. But when I was housed in Central Juvenile Hall, they housed me with people who were still fighting their fitness. And people would lose their fitness, were still housed there too, because they were juveniles. So you would see kids that were my age, 16, 17 years old, being sentenced to 45 years, 50 years. And I would just be like, damn, man, like that's a long time.
Yeah.
So why it didn't seem as bad at that point? I was like, man, fuck it, like it's better than that, you know? And it's crazy because I know women tend to mature a lot faster than men, right? But men, for me, I don't think I started to mature and really look at life differently until I was about 25, 26 years old.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, by
that's the age that your frontal lobe becomes completely developed. So that makes sense.
Yeah. So it's crazy to make a kid spend his life in jail, or even a huge portion of his life, for a mistake he made when he really had no true comprehension of life itself.
Right. Well, that's the argument, and that's why the laws have been changing. So
so when you take juvenile cases, are they mainly juveniles fighting adult cases, or are they juveniles fighting juvenile cases?
Both. I get a lot of people who have already done a significant amount of time behind bars, and their friends and family are now hitting me up like, what are they eligible for under these new laws? You know, what can we petition for? You know, he was 14 when he got convicted and sentenced to life. You know, what are our options? Most of my juvie cases are that scenario.
And that's crazy. Yeah, a lot of those are probably old Prop 21 cases.
Yeah.
So what are the things you look at when you say there's something like that happens? 14-year-old kid sentenced to life. What options do you look at for them?
Well, first, we got to determine, do they have a youth offender parole hearing scheduled? If they don't, then that may be something that we have to petition for. Have they been resentenced? Do we need to file a resentencing petition? Have they had a Franklin hearing? Franklin hearings are really important, especially if they already have the YOP hearing scheduled, because as I've explained a lot on my Instagram, when you go in front of the parole board for your youth offender parole hearing, you can't bring in any new information. You can only use what's already on the record. But if you have a Franklin hearing before that parole date, the whole purpose of the Franklin hearing is to bring in information about your youthful age when the crime occurred, how peer pressure might have affected you at that age, where you were in your life, where you are now. So it's just so important to put all of that stuff on the record so that it actually can be used at the parole board hearing, because if it's not on the record, you can't bring it in. You can't even bring it up.
Yeah, you're saying stuff that's going to be irrelevant to them. They're like, I ain't trying to hear that. Like, that's not
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
And when it comes to fighting your case, you're going to a trial, right? And I know you're saying you have to be you, right? You always want to be you, but at the same time, you have to know who your audience is. How important is it for the defendants to dress up? Like, rather like to say, I'm gonna go in some baggy pants with a button-up shirt. Like, how much more beneficial would it be to them to say, you know what, wear a suit and tie?
I mean, presentation is everything. When clients come in to retain, one of the things I say is, you have very few responsibilities as the client, but one of your responsibilities is be in court on time and be appropriately dressed. Don't come in sweats and slides. You want to show your respect to the court.
Yeah.
So that's, of course, the way that you look. People are going to make judgments on you, snap judgments immediately upon seeing you. And if you're already fighting a serious case, why would you want to, add to something that goes against you just by something as simple as the way that you're dressed?
Yeah.
So it's very important. And they also have a constitutional right not to be shackled or in prison garb when they go to trial.
Yeah. I think a lot of people that I've seen mistakes where people will still look kind of like, they'll think they're dressed up, but they still look kind of gangster. Like, you could have probably went a little tighter on that G. You know what I mean? Like you said, it's not you they're trying to impress. It's not the people in the audience. It's the jury. That's who they really, need to impress.
Yeah.
And there's something else I wanted to ask you. Coming on time, right? So how bad is it for the defendant to show up late, no matter what the excuse is? Like, how bad is it for them to show up, and how pissed off will the judge be for that?
I mean, if the judge, if they're late enough and the judge is pissed off enough, you get a warrant, and then that's just extra work for me. So, I always tell my clients, be on time, because you never know what kind of day the judge is having. You don't want to get a warrant because they could potentially remand you into custody, and now you're no longer able to fight your case out of custody just for the pure fact that you couldn't make it here on time. So
so I always say, if you have to, especially court, but anything, if you have an appointment and you have to be there by 1, get there by 12. So when you're fighting these cases, right, and how important is it, again, I can't stress this enough, because I know there's a lot of people that watch this, for people to be on their best behavior and not like, that's not true or anything like that. How important is it for the defendant to just stay quiet, stay calm, and know that they are not in charge at that particular point? Knowing that I know it could be emotional because their lives are on the line. I get that, but how important is it to stay calm, and why is that important?
I mean, it depends on what part of the case we're in. Obviously, if we're at trial, you can't be yelling things out. Then you just look like a loose cannon, and that's not going to help the way that the jury perceives you. But I really haven't had much problem with that. For the most part, my clients know to remain quiet, and that's what I'm here for, is to speak on their behalf. So I've never really had an issue with that. And if I did, I would deal with it appropriately, of course.
Yeah. Yeah. Like, because I have seen places where people like they go nuts. You know what I mean? Maybe because of like a lot of the cats I deal with are think they're gangster cats and like, fuck it, I don't care, I'll do all day anyways. And they try to, get all crazy with people, throw chairs, like do stupid shit. If your client were to do that in front of you, how would you address that?
I would let them know that, that's their one chance. And if it happens again, then I'm going to withdraw as counsel, because if they're just making my job harder, that's not what I contracted for. That's not what I agreed to when I took on the case.
Yeah.
So it's a breach of contract.
Yeah. And plus you have a reputation too. So
yeah,
it's like,
I mean, that doesn't really affect my reputation. It's not my behavior, but anytime the client is doing something that they've already been warned about and that is negatively impacting their case, that's something that goes against our contract. So.
Dope. Well, I really appreciate you coming on. And do you have anything else you want to add?
No, thank you so much for having me. Appreciate it.
Oh, thanks for coming on and chopping it up with us. And we'll put your Instagram page on the bottom. Follow her. She's I'm telling you, like, she's real gangster with it. As soon as I saw her, I was like, man, like I gotta have her on because you know what I mean. I know she has some shit to say. And so we'll put that. We'll put your number to contact you if you're ever in. Hopefully nobody has to utilize your services. You know what I mean? Because everybody's clean. But if you do, you know what I mean. Well, we'll put that up there.
We do record cleanups too. We do expungements.
Can we talk about that real fast?
Yeah. So we do expungements, and then we also do, if you're eligible, restoration of gun rights and stuff like that.
Okay. Yeah. That's one thing where I'm glad I got tried at the time I wasn't glad that I got tried as a juvenile, but after I grew up I was, because they didn't take away my right to vote and they didn't take away my ability to own a gun. So I got strapped to the pad. It's all legal. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So if somebody isn't as fortunate, and what could they what's the process like? What do they have to do to clean up their record?
So it's going to depend on the situation, but for felonies where you weren't sentenced to prison and you're no longer on probation or parole, you can file to get an expungement, and then once the expungement is granted, then if you file it wherever you reside. So if your residence is LA, even if the conviction happened in like Riverside, if you now reside in LA, you file the certificate of rehabilitation in LA. And you basically, provide mitigating information, what you've been up to since these convictions and why you're wanting to restore your name. And and then if that's granted, then it goes up to the DOJ and your civil rights are restored at that point.
Let's say you had a felony and you did go to prison. Is it the same process?
No. Well, you can't get an expungement.
Okay.
So you wouldn't be. So it's going to depend on whatever county you reside. It's going to depend on their requirements. Like, are you required to get an expungement before you get a certificate of rehabilitation? But if you were sentenced to prison, then you're not eligible for expungement. And I believe you would have to go straight to filing for a pardon, which those rarely even get responses.
And it's up to the governor, right? Yeah. And let's say if you're like, for me, because I was a juvenile, would there be anything I should do? Because like I said, I could vote, I can own guns. Is it even necessary for me to even try to clean up my record at that point, or is that record really non-existent?
Yeah, it's gonna just depend. But as far as I know, juvie convictions can't be expunged, I don't think.
Okay. Yeah. Okay. So if anyone took a deal and they didn't go to prison and they completed all the terms of their probation, then at that point, if they could hit you up and say, hey, I need to get this expunged, and then you can help them.
Yeah.
Perfect. Well, I appreciate it, Ms. Noriega. You've been, it's been a pleasure having you on.
Likewise. Thank you for having me.
Thank you. And everybody that's here, we're gonna have our information below if you need our services, and appreciate you coming on. Away out. Peace.